All right. So yes, we have a little bit of time while we are waiting for the dev track to finish, and we could just declare this as a break, or if anyone's got any interesting last minute stuff, you can come and share it here. Where Karthik is also hanging out. I think every time I read one of your long blog posts, Karthik, I'm like, life goals. Someday I want to write something with nice diagrams and, deep Emacs interestingness. I have not yet gotten the hang of even using AV to nearly the extent that you do. But yes, I have always looked at your diagrams very longingly and wondered how you make them.
With a lot of sweat and cursing, unfortunately.
It's all very nice.
Yeah, and I've seen your interactive SVGs, which is just wizardry. I have no idea how you do that. The kind where you can hover over different elements in the SVG and do interesting things.
Yeah, so it turns out if you just think of them as XML, which Emacs will let you because you can just Control C, and it'll switch back to text mode, right? Then you can be like, oh yeah, I can work with this using the DOM Emacs Lisp library. And then you can add title elements to it to get the hovers, or you can add hyperlinks. So in fact, the EmacsConf schedule is very naturally generated from Emacs Lisp itself, because there was no way I was going to handle 2-track schedules by hand. And that's just SVG so that you can then have the hovers. The important thing is that when you're exporting it to HTML, it has to be an inline SVG to get the fancy behaviors. If you're linking it in as an image, then it doesn't work. It has to be inline. So for example, for my org mode, I have my exports for images checked first if it's an SVG. And unless I have an attribute on it that says, no, just link to it because it's large and not interactive, it actually inlines all of that markup into the exported HTML. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. It's a little less mysterious now.
On the plus side, once it is in there as inline HTML, well, inline, it's in the inline markup, you can actually play around with it using JavaScript or CSS.
That's really neat. I had a question about some other SVG wizardry I've seen you do. So you have these SVGs that grow, right? Like they accumulate elements, almost like a slideshow. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. I started using that for one of the EmacsConf presentations. Well, the one EmacsConf presentation I've done in recent history, because it's nice to be able to add things gradually, right? Especially as you're giving a presentation. And that's also done with Emacs Lisp. What I do is I make the image, and then in Inkscape I can group together the elements that I want to appear at the same time. And then I can use Emacs to, I think I just add some CSS to them to make them like dimmer. And you just iterate through the different groups in that level, and you write out the intermediate SVG files, and then you can use Inkscape to convert them into PNGs if you want like images of each step that are in PNG format instead of SVG. But the basic idea is you group the elements together that you want in one step, and then you can manipulate it using the Emacs dom.el library because it's just an XML document. So you can say, all right, hide everything, or have everything visible and then remove the last one, or something like that. Iterate it, just show them one at a time, and then write your resulting document object model to a new file each step.
Do you
Does that
have
make sense?
that makes sense. So do you just write the ELISP, like is this on a case-by-case basis? Like every time you need to do this, do you write fresh ELISP to step through the SVG this way? Or do you have some kind of package or library to do
I think
this
I have a
more?
blog post. Let me go see if this is the one. It's probably just buried in my config, and then every time, like if I do it again, I'm sure I will find another thing that I've completely forgotten about and therefore have to recode or fix or whatever. But let me go see. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So, oh yeah, this one. Nice, I remember that one. Okay, so you get this SVG, and then this animate SVG paths. It's just a function I have. It takes the file name, it makes an output there. It adds one path back at a time. And it just creates a lot of these numbered frames. So as you can see here, I'm just saying, okay, take the whole thing, and then I think maybe I said it take the whole thing, make everything transparent, and then one at a time, make them opaque, and save that to the frame, to the image. So this theoretically is a somewhat reusable function that takes the SVG and just fills a directory with it.
What's the order in which it reveals things?
Top to bottom or bottom to top. It's whatever the SVG has. And so if you're grouping things together, you can rearrange things in Inkscape. If you've given them IDs, which I have another function for in EmacsLisp that just highlights something and lets me put an ID for it, then you can rearrange them yourself by looking at the markup, I guess. Or I think I actually have some code also that will rearrange the paths based on a list of IDs that I give it in a sequence. So this one is animating one element at a time here. It's kind of like interesting effect. But for larger things, like for this one, I can split this up into groups because I don't want to necessarily animate them letter by letter. And that one, oh yes, this is the function that I have for identifying the paths. It highlights it and then it asks me for a name, and this is the one that reorders it. So I can say this is the sequence that I want it animated in, and
So
it will.
So you don't actually need Inkscape at all, right? Because you have an ELISP function that will let you assign the order interactively.
Yeah. So if you're doing just all the elements one after the other, Inkscape is helpful for combining the different shapes. Breaking it apart, because when I get the PDF and I convert it, it's like one big element that has a very complex path. And if I want to animate it element by element, I have to break it apart and then recombine it so that this O looks like it's hollow instead of a tooth, like a circle, and another circle. Right. So there's a little bit of Inkscape cleaning up before then, but I really dislike the mouse-heavy stuff of Inkscape for assigning IDs and things like that. I haven't quite gotten the hang of it. So this is what it looks like before you group the elements together and you combine paths, which is what you have to do Inkscape for, because I can't make sense of the numbers in Emacs someday. So just combine. But once it's there, I don't like having to set the ID in this object properties on the right side, because there's a lot of clicking, and even if you press escape or tab and tab, it's not reliable. So that's why I have this function. And it lets me identify the paths and animate them from within Emacs, because Emacs is a text editor.
Yeah, in name only. But anyway, so the groups, if you've already assigned groups in Inkscape, then when you run it through this function in Emacs, you can assign an ordering to the groups, the order in which it will be revealed.
Yeah. What I did was I gave it all IDs. So I gave each group an ID, and then when I have the ID, I can say, you know what, maybe when I group it, I'm doing it in a bit of a haphazard way, not grouping the first thing first, and then the second thing, and the third thing. So it's a bit of a mess. And this one just resorts it by, I think, just looking everything up, storing it, and then putting it back in order. I remembered, I probably have the code for this somewhere, and if it's not, it's in the source code. For the source code, there should be a source. Yes, so there's an org source for this post, and if it's not in there, then it should be in my config, the definition of this function. Reorder paths. Oh, here we are. Sort paths. Yeah. There you go. So there, it takes it, it looks for it, and it adds it to the first layer.
Okay, you just explained the magic, which makes it less magical, but also something I could try. Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah, SVG is surprisingly powerful.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah.
I know it can do a lot more than what we typically use it for. So you also had this feature where I think you used CSS, where if you mouse over something in the SVG, something is highlighted in your web page. That may be a different.
Yeah. Like in the organizer's notebook. So I have a draft schedule here. Yeah, we've been doing all this stuff live, draft schedule, where if you have let's pick someone's top. Scan. Oh yeah, highlight. This. I think this. Oh, maybe it's the other way around. I need to put this stuff here first. Yeah. Okay. So you'll notice here how if I have some JavaScript that takes a look at what's in the URL, and if so, then it can highlight a specific thing using just might be CSS, might be actually I think it's JavaScript setting the CSS style on it. But yeah, you can play around with CSS. See, this one has a slightly darker, slightly thicker background. Yeah, so SVGs are great for that. And if you inspect it, which I don't think I have shared here, but if you inspect it, I will share my inspect. I have too many windows open, so I don't want to share my whole thing. But one of these, I don't even know which. How do I find? Okay, it's the developer tools window. Do I even have developer? Oh, I can't see it. Okay. If you inspect the page on the developer thingy, then it will show the SVG element. Yeah. And unfortunately, I can't share it easily right now. You just say inspect. This is actually, I think, how also the individual talks have current ones, right? So I just have this image over here, and then you just have that one, that specific talk styled differently.
How did you generate this SVG, the one showing the schedule?
Oh, okay. Emacs. Emacs publish, I think. Let me share it. EmacsConf pub. One of these windows. Okay. Let's see. Slow down. Look at all the windows. Okay, I'm just going to share the whole screen. Screen 2. No, screen 1. All right. And okay. I think this is the one. Is it sharing my screen? It is not sharing my screen. I'm going to try this again. Okay. All right. So the schedule. This is the actual function that creates the SVG rectangles for the talks. Oops, my screen share ended. Let me do that again. Screen one. All right. And as you can see, it's just a little bit of math for the X, the Y. We color it differently depending on whether I'm making the schedule for the public view. So do we do development talk or general talk as colors, or if I want to color it for the backstage view, I can keep track of the talks by status. Anyway, so SVG track takes the track and all the talk information, and it makes all the little rectangles. And this is the thing that adds a little hover for the times and titles as well. So Emacs's API for dealing with this is actually pretty good. Oh, and I have a hook here that modifies it. You just run through different functions to tweak it. So I could say, okay, color it in case my time constraints are not being met, and then I can panic about the schedule some more. And the nice thing about this is you can hang on a second. Let me do this carefully. Draft schedule. All right, here you go. It's super nice to be able to refer to it within Emacs itself because Emacs has SVG support. So this is, for example, the organizer view inside an org mode file, and it has all those SVGs. You don't have the hover things because it's just an image in it, but yeah, SVGs, Emacs, awesome.
Oh, that's very cool. You're actually drawing the rectangles like from scratch.
It took a little bit of figuring out, especially since I realized I want it horizontal on the wiki pages so that it fits on people's screens, but I want it vertical on like in my organizer view so that I don't have to keep tilting my head sideways. And this is the code for, this is the code for that. See, I'm just directly adding G nodes for groups or A nodes for the hyperlinks and rect as well. I think the SVG library also has functions for adding rectangles and things like that, but sometimes I vaguely remember sometimes they don't return the node that I'm expecting, so it's okay to just use the DOM functions directly. And then the whole thing gets SVG printed afterwards. See? So I can just say SVG printed, and then it's good to go. Let me see. Actually, do I have SVG? How does schedule for track SVG?
It's a shame that you can't visually interact with parts of an SVG in Emacs the way you can in
Oh. Some people have some interesting experiments with that. I haven't dug into it much, but people have figured out how to use the mouse events and then figure out what there's LEC draw, right? So LEC draw is a package that lets you draw SVGs and you can drag things and whatever. So that's very cool. And there's also an org related package that lets you visualize your schedule as boxes. That's a thing also. So people have experimented with mouse interaction, and it's cool. But I haven't had the brain space to do that yet. But it would be nice.
Yeah, you're right. I remember using EL Easy Draw and being surprised at what it can do. The only thing I think I discovered is that it ends up creating lots of new SVGs, kind of the way that you do when you show elements one by one. You're essentially creating one SVG for each state, one full SVG for each intermediate state of the presentation, let's say. That's kind of what EL Easy Draw does, and I thought that's not good for performance. And it is kind of on the slow side if you compare it to like Inkscape or anything else. But
You
yeah,
can
what it
actually-
can do is pretty amazing.
You can dynamically modify an SVG object and it will automatically get updated in Emacs, which is a technique that I use a lot in subed. So for example, if I have waveform show all in this, it will, like, it's very easy to just move one element, for example, or make an element larger or smaller. And that seems...
Oh, sorry, Sasha.
It might be pretty efficient, I don't know, but I'm certainly not like writing it to disk each time and reloading it.
That's also how the fog of war technique that Eric and I demoed in 2020 EmacsConf for dungeon mode works, where we demonstrated, showing parts of the map, and then, different characters have different abilities that allow you to see different dungeon features, and then if your last character of that class or race dies, then you suddenly can't see secret doors or whatever anymore. And so just make that disappear between one turn and the next is just working with, just simply update the SVG and there goes the screen. No fuss, no muss. It's pretty awesome.
So this is an example of how I'm using it to kind of show where we are in the track. And then here's mouse interaction, right? I can change my timestamp right from there, which is fine.
So I'm curious how this works exactly. To affect any kind of change in the SVG, you have to use the DOM library, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, but that means that it's going to be, anytime you make a change, it's going to read in the XML, convert it to an ELISP DOM, right? And then you modify that tree.
Yeah, you keep the DOM, in this case, for example, I'm actually constructing it using Emacs Lisp objects directly. If you were working with an external SVG, you would parse it first, yes, using XML parse file or something like that, and then you would have it in memory. When you insert the image, you insert the Lisp document object model that you have, and then any changes you make to that document object model automatically get updated in the image somehow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'll show you the code, subed, in a second. Patch subed.
Yeah, so I was under the impression that there's a round trip to XML involved to do anything.
No.
Like to go from displayed to in-memory modified back to displayed involves a round trip. Yeah.
So let me see where's my thing that changes it. So when it's the time. Restore IP position. There's probably some kind of hook that I'm listening to here. Playback position hook. Oh, it's this update current bar. All right, so what update current bar does is it moves the bar to the right place. And you see here how this SVG, I'm actually just reading it off the text property so that I know which one is the current one in the overlay. I remove the old one, just the element. I don't have to mess around with the image. I remove the old one for some reason. Just make sure, I guess. You can actually just update the attribute on it. Oh, I think this is just so that I don't have to worry about whether there is one or there isn't. And then I add a bar at the right position. And then makes that little animated sweeping thingy. So you see how I'm not recreating the SVG at this point. I'm just getting it from the overlay.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I wonder what it's doing, what it's actually doing under the hood when you run SVG remove or.
Yeah, I
So
don't know
I
too.
think it's RSVG is tied into the display engine, so to speak.
Yeah, that it is. But RSVG, the library, can only deal with actual SVGs, right? Like XML SVGs. But we're dealing with the ELISP DOM of an SVG.
So the display
So
engine
that's the
can
conversion.
re-enter the list. I do
Okay.
know that the display engine can re-enter the list engine. So I think that may be the answer.
Yeah, no, you can just
Hmm.
SVG insert image the object itself. So here, for example, SVG create just creates it actually just creates a DOM model. So this is Lisp. It doesn't get printed as string representation or anything. And then you can SVG insert image, or you can set the display and and pass it like as an SVG image. SVG image gives you an image object if you want to do the regular sort of display thingy.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that one says it turns it into a string representation. Or at least maybe that's just how it gets returned. Anyhow, some kind of magic happens, but I don't have to worry about it. It just stays in Lisp on my side.
Yeah, yeah, but I was thinking about it because I expect that if it's converting to XML all the time, every time you make a change, then that's going to be the bottleneck for any kind of heavy interactive SVG editing or modification in Emacs, the kind that EL Easy Draw does.
But maybe if we make it compelling enough, then the folks upstream can say, all right, like the way that JSON got a lot faster. Who knows? Maybe we can get that to be faster too.
Yeah. I see a lot of potential for better UIs in Emacs with using SVGs.
Yeah. Nicolas Rougier has all those experiments, right?
Yeah, but all of those, I think, are bound by the limitations of how deeply SVGs are embedded in the display engine, because that's kind of what we're discussing. We want to avoid going to XML. I mean, going from XML to ELISP DOM to modified ELISP DOM back to XML. We want to avoid that round trip.
Yeah, for sure.
Or make that as fast as possible. Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything they want to share?
I've always got stuff I can share, but I'd pretty happily defer. I've already seen what I made. Karthik?
Oh, I'm a fly on a wall here. I'm not.
Okay.
I didn't come in with the intent to share anything. Yeah.
How about you, Sasha? What do you have other stuff you haven't shown up recently?
Aside from all the panicking about getting EmacsConf together this year,
I
just wanted to
understand.
Let's see, what do I have in my recent fiddled with?
So I have
Let
a
me
project
stop
called I have a project called Oofta, which is a little bit fun. Let me pull it up here before I share. You can see my messy desktop. Okay, there it is. And I suppose I'll want a show is on the queue. Probably that one. And we'll just be root.
Oh, keeping in mind that graphics is going to end in about 5 minutes.
Ooh, perfect. That'll keep me from being my normal long-winded self.
Have you already made contact with Emmanuel, or do I need to go and quickly do a? Okay, I'm going to quickly do a check-in then.
Okay, sounds good. Did you hear back from him? I'm gonna Assume that's a yes. So, all right, I'll go ahead and share screen here and just take a look, a very brief look at this, assuming I can present.
I had
Okay,
a question for Sacha. I had a question for Sacha and you, Corwin. Hello?
Yeah, you're good. Go for it.
Yeah. So in past years in the EmacsConf, there was a talk by someone, usually John Wigley or I think Philip last year, about new
Yes.
developments in Emacs.
Yes,
right?
And that is kind of at the whim of the Emacs developers, whether that is included in the in the conference. It's kind of up to the how busy folks are and whether somebody can carve out the time to prepare it.
I see. Yeah, I noticed that there wasn't one for this year, and I know of at least one improvement or one change to Emacs. It's small, but I'm guessing it's very crucial for a certain class of Emacs users, and I can talk about that, just that one thing.
Please do.
But you can.
No, I don't have the presenter right, so I can't share anything, and we've got about 1 minute, so have at.
Okay. So the change is that in the development version of Emacs, child frames are now supported in the terminal. And I suspect that not many people know about it yet. But basically this means something like Corfu is going to work fine when you're running Emacs in a terminal, as well as pause frames or anything that shows like a little pop-up window that previously did not work in terminal Emacs. That's it. That's the update.
Cool. Okay, there. I have a share screen button. We'll see if I think we're just about to cut away, but I'll go ahead and see if I can get this going. I'll just share my whole screen, and this will be a little ugly as it comes in. So this is a project that I think is a little bit fun. It's called UKTA. And basically what this does, you can see it on my source hut, GitHub, that's sr.ht/MPLS/Corwin/OFDA. And this is a very simple approach to using an org file as kind of a replacement for SQLite. It's very simple, but it does support like a dot style pathing notation, so you can get at deeply nested data, and just gives a little. There's a shell script wrapper that comes with it, and
all
that
right.
basically us.
Theoretically, this is the Q&A for. All right. Theoretically, this is the Q&A for the graphics talk. Oops, I have to unmute over here. Sorry. I'm too.
All right, I had a little audio bleed through. My apologies. Can you still hear me? All right, I'm going to guess, because I still see us live on the screen, that we're still live. All right, So I'll just press on. So what we're looking at here is a project called UKTA. Here's the Emacs Lisp source for it. You can see it's not real impressive, even with all of its boilerplate. It's under 200 lines of code. And this is kind of a proof of concept, giving us the ability to use a .org file as a flat file database. The intention here is to get kind of transition from SQLite, which is using a flat text file as a database, to being able to have more of a literate database where we can intermix documentation about the data with the data itself. And then by giving a path on the command line, I'll go back to the README, just take a look at that. And you can see there's a couple of kind of examples here where we're here we would be querying a path. We can also provide a value, and that'll set data into the file. It also has an optional first parameter to specify the specific org file. By default, it looks for a file called data.org. And of course, that can be used inside Emacs as well, although the value of that may be a little bit limited compared to more sophisticated technologies like org element. This is not an implementation that mirrors all of org element or any of the more complex functionality of org. It's really as simple as possible, proof of concept to just to be able to kind of work with the data inside an org file and get it back out on the command line. So see if we can make it work here.
Corwin, could you increase the font size?
I surely will.
Of the terminal.
All right, how's that?
That's much better. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's see if we do have. Well, we can probably fake it. Let's do this. All right, and then in theory, this just works. So we'll touch. Let's. So we'll just create a data file called data.org. Make sure that worked. Looks reasonable. Let's try adding some data to it. Not so happy. Okay, let's try it the hard way. I'll come back over here to my usage and we'll just try running it manually.
Is finding Emacs really the issue?
I think it's not like in my path. It's not finding opta.el and pwd. It wants it to be on the load path.
I see.
So I may have to even mess with that further, but we'll just try it. So this should retrieve the value if it works. Okay. Add to list, take a symbol.
Yeah, add to list takes a symbol. You're going to have issues with bash quoting, so you should escape the quote inside
Thank
the.
you. Got you. Irritating. I'm not Lambda. Whoa. That may work. I got my parents right. Never demo live. Ooh, how exciting. Okay. Without batch, though, we may not get our output. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's as far as I'm going to take it. I should have prepped a demo environment. I wasn't really prepared to demo.
No worries. So I have a couple of questions about this feature. The first question is, do you use it?
I do use it. Yeah. I should have gotten onto the environment where I'm using it.
So
It's a little messy.
what kinds of
It gets
things
into
do you
another
use
project
it
that's
for?
way too complicated to get into.
Yeah, but what kinds of things do you use it for?
It's sort of hard to answer that without getting into my other project, but essentially I've got a web development tool chain that is kind of a web-based REPL that is kind of a literate compute environment, if you will, allowing me to use a bunch of virtual machines as one big computer. That project is called Ghost Wheel. And so in order to show off the homepage, so on this page, you can see the list of machines, and then you'll also see there's these state indicators. So, and right now, as a matter of fact, what I've been hacking on is trying to get support for org tables. Right now, I support only changing all of the data within some heading, subheading, or whatever. What I'd like to be able to do is specify using org table FM syntax the particular row column. So find a particular named table, find a particular row, column 1, row 2, column 1, and then set the value from the command line. Currently, I just use it for very simple stuff. I don't really want to show that off. I've got another page that lists all of the DNS names that are associated, that are hosted on Ghost Wheel. And so I use that to add items to the list. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if
Yeah,
we can...
it sounds useful.
Let's see if we can find... Ooh.
So one thing that I would like, I guess it's easy enough to write, but is a tool exactly like this where I can query my org files from the command line. But
that's
it's going
exactly
to be
what
more
it says.
like a but it's going to be more like a database query where I say select all headings where that contain this string or that have this tag, right? The kinds of things that you can do with RQL from outside, from inside Emacs, right? To be able to do those from the command line with, I'm going to invoke SQL here, like SQL select statements, but it doesn't have to be that syntax, right? Just that capability.
Right.
I can see that being
pretty
useful as a command line tool, and I don't even care about write, like the ability to write or manipulate the file. Just query from the command line. That sounds pretty
Yeah,
useful.
yeah, exactly. To be able to dig a piece of data out of an org file as well, for my purpose, it's very useful to be able to replace it, because then I can deal with submit the form, and that might be like a sign-up form. And then I just add the user, add an entry into the org file for that user, right? What it doesn't do is any relational data, right? So everything, it's essentially a document data store, if you will, like a Mongo kind of.
True. So over on IRC, Screwlisp asks, what does it mean to query an org file? Is the data in a table? Is it in an ELISP nested list view of a table that has a name in org? And my answer to that is that if you ever used RQL, written by Alpha Papa, then that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So you query based on one of a set of attributes, right? And these attributes are any of the anything that's recognized by org. For example, the to-do status, the dates, the outline path, the headings, a full text search, and there are several more. The presence or absence of certain properties, right? Using any combination of those, if you want to dig down and find some data in an org file, that's the kind of query I'm talking about. It is somewhat equivalent to being able to write SQL queries where you match on things just for your org files.
Okay. I think we might have figured out our problem. It was DOS encoding. See if that works. No. Well, let's just do the easy thing.
I switched the development track over to just watching the gen track since I couldn't find a manual. Also, Eludo wants to mention the Emacs Carnival theme for December is the people of Emacs, of which you are all very awesome. Thank you so much for your patience. Today has been very interesting. But yes, at some point we can show that too. And we can basically wrap up anytime we like or hang out anytime we like. Hang out for as much time as we like also.
Okay. So this is, okay, at least I got as far as a working demo here. So now you can kind of see what's going on. And I'll just wrap that into a little prettier output. And you can see that it modified the value. So it's pretty darn simple. Again, all it's doing is completely replacing all of this content with whatever new value is given as its final argument after naming the data path. So the one refinement we can do, just to get a little more complex example going, we'll deepen our structure a little bit. And try that. So here now we'll say test 2. And we can take a look at the data file and see that it has adjusted that. Because test 2 was completely unique, that worked fine. If that were not the case, we would have had to specify the path using dot notation like this. And that's pretty much it. Took me much longer to figure out why it wasn't just working than it did to demo it, I'm afraid. And again, what I really like about this program, besides the fact that I find it quite useful to just be able to stuff values into an org file from the command line using a shell script, is what I really like about this is that it's a whopping 190 lines of code, including all the boilerplate. And I will share the project into the chat.
So, Corwin, you're not using org element for this, are you?
No. Yeah, great question. Let's just get a little into the code here. Or maybe it would be more fun to actually open it here. So the only real requires here, I do use clib. Mostly I'm directly using the macros from org. Particularly, I'm extremely fond of this function. I would love to see this just promoted somewhere deeper into Emacs proper, so that I don't have to load all of the org macros to get to this particularly useful one, which just tells me whether ignoring white space a string has any characters, has greater than 0 length.
Isn't that just string blank p?
So this is a little different. This deals with I may struggle to remember the details, but and it's possible that the non-org specific version has even been improved, or I didn't use it correctly. But I believe my experience was it didn't handle new lines, for example, quite the same way. So getting into what this actually does, most of the program is finding the relevant part of the file. You'll see that we start out by doing a depth-based search, capture the value that we're looking for. And then finally, we widen the buffer and keep handling the case where we might be being called from within Emacs in a narrowed buffer. This another what should be documented at the top. So that is obviously going to load org. Just double check that. Yeah, it is going to load org. Yeah, and we can see that because it didn't find the function until I loaded org, and then it did when I did Control H F to get definition of a function. So widen the buffer, and then I just start looking for the search. You can see I'm doing simple, regular expression-based searches here, looking for lines ultimately that start with a star. That was a little simpler format that didn't quite work out. So I'm searching for here. This is a little tricky, but I'm searching for a number of stars equal to the depth that I want. The depth that I want being calculated based on the number of dots that were in the query string. From there, kind of skipping some stuff, right? Once we find our starting position, then we're going to have to find the end of that, the section that we're going to read or replace. Text a tiny bit smaller.
So I checked org string.
All this.
I checked org string NWP, and it's the same as string blank P.
Exactly the same code or the same result?
No, it's the same result. Well, it's the same check, but string blank P will return a match object, like a string match object, whereas the org version will return the string itself if it finds a match, as in if it's blank.
I don't remember that was what I ran into.
As a Boolean check, they are the same. If you use it as, is it blank or not?
So, yeah, I've talked for way longer. I literally thought this would be a 5-minute thing. I'm not sure if there are any questions on it, but just to simply answer your question, no, it doesn't use org element. This is pure regex based work.
So the advantage of not
the
using
most complicated part was getting clean output.
Right. So the advantage of not using org element is that you don't have to load org or org element, right? And it's going to be faster.
Org element, that's true.
And it's going to be faster both because you don't have to load org element and because you don't have to run org element, like the org parser. But on the other hand, you end up loading. On the other hand, you end up loading all of org anyway. So at that point, it might just be better to use org element because it's more robust. For example, if you have a bunch of leading stars inside a source block or something, you don't want to misclassify that. So,
matter of fact, I believe I had to do some fussing with it to avoid to deal with not just that, but drawers and things like that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
at the end of the day, that was just an extra 10 or 20 characters in the regular expression, so I just shrugged and wrote them. You can see there are a number of I happen to like writing regular expressions and find them relatively readable, so so it didn't bother me doing that. I've also done a bunch of work with org element with the Dungeon project, which of course uses that extensively to pull data out of tables and so on. And indeed, I think that may ultimately be my solution. I've been kind of distracted on a side quest to improve the org table FM parser. There's a post on my blog about the work that I've done there, and recently started talking to Igor, the new org maintainer who took over in the last year or so from Bastian, just about what it would take to kind of pick that up, or at least get it to a point where somebody else could work on it. It's pretty dense right now. Show that out as well. So this thing is a bit of a monster, but at the end of the day, our goal is to extend the syntax, is to be able to use this org table FM syntax in other contexts. So if you haven't looked at org table FM, these I bar or these I markers are telling us to look for the table separator. So positioning based on the location of a table separator. I find that a little bit brittle, just because it's really easy to go in and decide, oh, it'll look better with an additional line separator in there, and then and then all of these formulas break everywhere. So it'd be a little more fun to have at least variables in there, and that's kind of part of the scope. If we look, and here you get kind of a hint of the new syntax I'd like to support. Things like $, $_, keyword It's probably a half-hour talk just to get into what every single one of these would do, but this post does give some context to that. And more importantly, there's a complete test program that worked the last time I was playing with it. And this gives you complete examples of all the syntax that the work in progress does currently support. You'll see some of these items are commented out. Those aren't supported yet. And before I would implement them, now, especially now that we're talking in terms of trying to take org itself this direction, of kind of beefing up the table FM format parsing so that it could be used in other contexts besides specifically within formula. I wouldn't want to add features to it without discussing those. So this is just a simple, basically a literate test file, if you want to call it that. The perhaps key improvement here is naming all of the different capture groups, which just if you're working with really huge regular expressions, which this is, let me just make sure the whole regex is right in here. You can see it, yeah. So here's the actual rewrite. Scale it a little bit so you can see it's kind of a monster. And that's all using RX. So hopefully that looks pretty familiar. Dollars for specifying a column, @ to specify a row. So I have the keys. Anybody else want to show and tell?
We're going to cut over to the automated introduction for the Saturday closing remarks in like 4 minutes.
That sounds brilliant.
Oh, but a quick mention of the Emacs Carnival. So the Emacs Carnival is a shared blogging theme where lots of people write about a specific theme, and then if you write about it, you can send your link to whoever's hosting the carnival, and it's a great way to discover other people's cool stuff. So if I take presenter, hang on a second, take presenter. Oh, actually, haha, I know, I'm going to make Eludom present it. Haha, you are now in charge. Okay, take it away. I made you presenter.
So I've been using Emacs for like 46 years now, back to Tico Emacs. And as I just said in the chat, I've found that the people who use Emacs tend to be interesting people in many different ways. And so this month, I'm just saying, let's give a shout out to some of the interesting people, we've met along the way. And, including some of the people that are putting on this conference are some of the most interesting and helpful people I've ever met. So thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you. Pardon me. I'll say more than that. Maybe I will. I completely agree with you, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's how Sasha and Amin and Leo really dragged me into this, into being a volunteer. And I'm sure we'll talk about this in the closing remarks, but I can't recommend volunteering for this project enough. It's just so fun to talk backstage with the presenters, and I don't know. It's an extremely engaging community. Really helpful.
I like the way y'all are so patient and awesome, and I can be just quietly having my little freak out here, and everyone's fine, and we'll even help debug things live as needed. So this is all good. Anyway, so if people want to participate, you basically write a blog post. If you don't have a blog yet, there are any number of packages in Emacs as well as web-based services, but really, like, you can get something going with org exporting to HTML and maybe even figure out RSS, or you can use a static site generator like Hugo, or you can find if you can set up WordPress, that's another way to do it, or you can email me your thing and I'll post it on my blog and let me know who you want, how you want to be credited for it. Anyway, so you can share your story, or share your story about somebody else's story, and celebrate Emacs community. And we can send it to George also, who will then make links in that blog post.
And on the subject of community, I also heartily recommend the IRC community on Emacs. Pound Emacs is another one of those things that I just personally can't get enough of, and I hear a lot of stories about just how it's helped people.
All right, we are now having the automated introduction, and then it's going to rejoin over here very soon. Hang on a second.
Beautiful.
While that's going, Saturday close, and let's arrange our screen nicely. All right, we made it to the end of the first day. Woohoo! Thank you for joining us for the first day of EmacsConf 2025. Feel free to spread the word because there is still another day of fun talks tomorrow. So hashtag EmacsConf and hashtag Emacs. If you do hashtag Emacs on Mastodon or Blue Sky or other places, I will probably find it. Or if I don't, you can just let me know also. The pre-recorded talks should be up on the talk pages already. The live talks, we'll probably actually get them up within the next week or two. I think they already started processing, so I just had to sit down and then work with our wonderful army of volunteer captioners to get them all nicely captioned. But anyway, so the pre-recorded talks are also up on YouTube, and I will eventually also upload them to TubeNix, which is a PeerTube instance. We will work on extracting live talks. If you'd like updates, please subscribe to the EmacsConf Discuss mailing list. If you've got ideas for making things better, we have so many ideas. I always end up with a very long to-do list after these things. Please add them to the pad. I'd love to hear from you on how we can make it even smoother next year. There are about 100 people watching on Gen and 100 people watching on Devs, which is really awesome. It's amazing to think that we can have an Emacs party for a lot of people. And we can only do this because of all the wonderful speakers, volunteers, participants, and very patient people in our lives who make it possible through all the time and support. So this year, we had a lot. Corwin did most of the hosting. Also dropped by earlier, so that's great. I hope Leo is okay. We managed. And I'm Sasha, by the way. I was running around backstage and occasionally dropping in to go all on the stream. There are lots of other volunteers who are not on air. So, for example, during the proposal review process, we got a lot of wonderful comments from JC Hillary, Trico, and James Anders Howell. Captions from Amitav and Rodion, and other people have actually started also helping with the captions as well. So Jaybird just sent in some stuff today too. We are slowly working on getting a mirror in the EU set up, so it'll be a little faster for people. So thanks to Yang3 for lending us that server. Bavin and Michael and Ian and Jamie and Eeyore and Floyd Calder have also helped out as well. Thanks to the Free Software Foundation for the mailing lists, the media server, and of course, GNU Emacs itself, for which an astonishing amount of the scripting is done in Emacs. It's great. Thanks to RIP for the server that we're using for OBS, so that we can just VNC into it and I can manage 2 tracks without making my computer melt. It's great. And of course, to all the users and contributors and project teams that work on all the free software that this stuff is built on. Emacs, OrgMode, ERC, Tramp, Magit, or Magit, Big Blue Button, Etherpad, IkiWiki, Icecast, OBS, The Lounge, Libera Chat, FFmpeg, OpenAI Whisper, WhisperX, the Aeneas Forced Alignment Tool, SciTransfer, Subed, Subseg, Mozilla Firefox, MPV, and TemperMonkey, and other things I probably forgot to mention. Thanks to Shoshin for the music, and thanks to people also who've donated through the Working Together program, like Scott and Jonathan and other anonymous donors. So that's a quick thanks. There's more tomorrow, but Corwin, do you have any parting words?
My parting words, Sasha, are a thanks to you, and not just a thanks for the hundreds of hours that you put into preparing this conference, over the years and probably just this year, but also for all that you do for the Emacs community. You are a real unsung hero, even though I do hear your praises sung. They really can't be sung enough. In fact, I just this last week recommended to 2 different people your blog as a place to get a first introduction to Emacs. Your Emacs news is an incredible contribution, and just I want you to hear us thanking you. Thank you, Sasha.
Emacs is a lot of fun, and it's just, and Emacs people are a lot of fun, so it's all very wonderful. Yeah, we can wrap up here. People can keep hanging out if they want. I have a kiddo who is probably going to be back home soon, and will pounce on me for more hugs. So I will see you all tomorrow. For more probably the same kind of
go ahead and shut it down, save our energy for tomorrow. We do like to run into hours long closing tomorrow, so we'll work on resisting that. I suggest we go get some rest and come back at it fresh tomorrow. Anybody else?
Yes.
Any concerns with that, or shall we go for it?
Sounds good to me. If you've got ideas, pop them into the Etherpad. And thank you so much for sharing this time with us.
See you tomorrow.